Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Day of the New York Times, and I'm so happy to welcome you tonight, even though, unfortunately, Guillermo del Toro wasn't able to be with us to talk about his new film, Crimson Peak. One of the stars of the films is here, and he is just, we're so grateful to him for pitching in at the last minute. He's well known around the world for his compelling characters on stage and screen, including Loki in the Thor films, on London's West End, where he won the Laurence Olivier Award, on the BBC and PBS, where he played Henry IV and Henry V, opposite a who's who of British acting talent. And this year, he's in, of course, Crimson Peak. He's in the film High Rise, and he has a new film that's coming up called I Saw the Light, in which he plays Hank Williams. You'll hear much more about him from our moderator. She's a culture reporter on the culture desk of the New York Times, where she writes for the arts pages, and she's interviewed everyone from punk bands to Tina Fey to Ghostface Killah. Recently, this week, she visited Guillermo and did a film of his Bleak House, which is where he writes, and he has all his creepy characters and wax figures. So she can tell you a little bit about that, as can our guest. So please join me in welcoming Milena Rysick and our very special guest, Tom Hiddleston.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us and for sticking around to see Tom, who was just telling me backstage that he was literally on the treadmill when he got the call to come and fill in tonight. So thank you so much.
I'm sorry, if I need to make a few apologies. First of all, I apologize that I'm not Mexican and that I'm not a visionary cinematic genius. And all the things I'm sure that you expected when you bought tickets to see this. But yes, I was on the treadmill. Next week I go off and start Skull Island, which is a new King Kong film, and there's a lot of running about in the jungle, so I thought I'd practice the running about. Anyway, here I am.
Well, we're so glad that you could make it. You are not Guillermo, but I think you will do just fine.
Thank you.
We will have some time to chat, and then we'll have a couple of minutes for some audience Q&A, and there'll be some mics set up for you guys so everybody can hear you. So I want to start by talking about, as you guys heard in the intro, I had a chance a little while ago to go visit with Guillermo at his house, Bleak House, where he keeps all kinds of crazy monsters and Frankensteins. And you have not seen that. You have not experienced
No, I've never been. I really want to go. He talks about it like it's his own private Disneyland. It sounds extraordinary, and I get a sense of what it's like just from working with him for 4 or 5 months and seeing his extraordinary passion for all of his great loves. He's someone who finds beauty in the shadows, and he loves Gothic material. He's such a collector of all that stuff. So yeah, one day I hope an invitation will be in the mail.
Yeah, well, what's fascinating about him is that he surrounds himself with all this creepy stuff. And we have a little clip from that visit. Do you guys want to see inside the house? All right, can we play that? Is Frankenstein your favorite monster?
Frankenstein's creature is, to me, the most moving and beautiful monster, and it's an amazing piece of design. The house is a little bit of a library. It's 2 houses, actually, one next to each other. I write here, I draw here, and we design some of the movies here. And I'm going to show you a little curiosity. This over here is an insect, a phasmid from Malaysia that I bought when I was a teenager in New York. And we ended up using it as the basis for the insect on Pan's Labyrinth. Not everybody will agree that everything's a treasure, but it's a treasure for me.
But you're never scared in these houses.
I made it a point to live with all the guys I admire, H.P. Lovecraft, Oh, no, never, ever scared you.
So that's a little taste of Guillermo's Bleak House. So what I found fascinating is he is surrounded by all these creepy crawlies and monsters, and yet he himself is this delightful and very sweet man. And it seems unfathomable that he would come out, that all that kind of stuff would come out of his imagination. Was that your experience in working with him?
Yeah, it's amazing when you meet him. He is such a warm, generous, good-natured, sweet, sensitive man. You know, being around on set with him is he's a very light. It's a very light and light-hearted set to be on. But I think he's so wise that he understands that, you know, all of our lives are a balance of the light and the dark, and I think he understands the place of the darker aspects of our nature and our world that make for interesting stories to tell in film, as a reflection of. It's a safe place to reflect those thoughts, feelings, and things that happen. But I genuinely found his wisdom extraordinary to be around. And Crimson Peak for him is he's poured his heart into it. It's a love song to everything he admires, to the genre of Gothic romance in literature and in cinema, to Hammer horror, to Gothic fiction like the Bronte sisters and The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe and Horace Walpole, and all of this stuff that he dearly loves.
But that stuff was not necessarily familiar to you, right? You didn't come up as a Gothic romance fan, right?
Not particularly. I was always familiar with the archetypes. I think it's impossible to grow up in England and not be, you know, sort of understanding that the trajectory of Gothic romance is that there is always a young, pure-hearted, innocent heroine who is drawn towards a dark stranger with a mysterious past, and she falls in love perhaps, or she's drawn by her sexuality towards him, and he always has a crumbling mansion on the hill, and you'd think they'd know better, but but there's, you know, these were archetypes that actually at the time were incredibly revolutionary. You know, this was a deeply repressed time. And especially things like, you know, the sexuality of young women and the darker aspects of our imagination were never discussed. It was not societally appropriate. And so Gothic romance was a genre that actually was predominantly came from women, and was a way of exploring those themes, how love is a force of change and is chaotic and often dangerous, and that it can impel you into situations which are terrifying. And the very first, I didn't know this until Guillermo pointed me towards it, but the very first Gothic novel that is sort of acknowledged as a romance is The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, and it was the first time in fiction that a writer had used the supernatural or explained the supernatural in terms of unprocessed emotional trauma. And up until this point, if you talked about ghosts, you were talking about they were emblems of a Judeo-Christian conception, heaven, hell, demons, that kind of thing. And Radcliffe was explaining or introducing ghosts as the way we think of it now, which is they are emotions trapped in time. And then it gets taken on, and so it was, in a way, it was an education for me, the research for this film.
Is he one of those directors that starts out by giving you a reading list and a pilot?
Well, I asked for one, so I walked into it. But I always find that helps me to create I want to sync up with the director's vision every time I go to work. I want to understand the story they're trying to tell and how they're trying to tell it. And when I first read the script, I could understand that Crimson Peak was, he was playing with these archetypes, you know. And I could see the inspiration of Lord Rochester and Mr. Darcy and Signor Montoni, in my character, Thomas Sharp. But then I could see, and I don't want to spoil things, but I could see how he was, he plays with your expectations. You expect each character to be one thing, and those expectations are confounded and subvertive in a fascinating way.
And of course, one of the things that he's known for is the visuals, and this movie is no exception. When we talked before, you said that the house is almost a character in the film, and it has its own backstory. In fact, Guillermo told me he wrote a backstory for the house that he gave you as a character study.
The house is amazing. It is a principal character, and it harbors secrets in the same way that human beings harbor secrets. The house is if the house were a human being, it would need a 30 years of therapy.
Wait, on that note, let's watch the clip where we get to see the house.
Goodness, how many rooms are there?
I don't know. Would you like to count them? What do you think? Does it look the part?
It does. Although it's even colder inside than out.
I know, it's a disgrace. We try to maintain the house as best we can, but with the cold and the rain, it's impossible to stop the damp and erosion. And with the mines right below, well, the wood is rotting, and the house is sinking.
That's just your average workday.
Yeah.
Where you go hang out in a place like that.
Yeah.
Did you have time to explore all these nooks and crannies that he built in that had little secrets in them?
It was actually an amazing day. I was in the middle of a costume fitting with our costume designer, Kate Hawley, whose work in this film is absolutely dazzling. I was wearing some of those clothes. It was my first fitting or my second fitting, and Guillermo came rushing in saying, they've finished the set, you have to come and have a look. And so I ran over we shot it in Toronto, and I ran across the lot and opened the door of what would be any other soundstage in North America, and it was like entering a magical world. It was fully realized, fully imagined, built on 3 stories. It could run up and down the stairs. The elevator worked. The clay that comes through the floorboards was there. It was real. It was an extraordinary thing. And it felt very childlike, actually. It felt like the experience of a child when somebody takes you through an experience like that, and you think you're disappearing into a fantasy. It was incredible.
Did you bring any visitors on set and just freak them the hell out?
No, I didn't. I should have. Yeah, it's a missed opportunity.
So you said when you approach a role, you really dive in and do a lot of research. In this case, your character is a kind of inventor. And did you study, 19th century, early 20th century engineering?
Well, I hasten to add, I would make an appalling engineer. But the reason I do it is because I always feel I need to create an imaginative context which is very rigorously built, and then I can be free in it and not. So that's why I do the research, is so that I understand the world the director is creating, and then once I inhabit it, I can be free with my instinct and try not, because acting is really about instinct and feeling. It's not about intellect. But you can't just be fringing sweely, because there's a very rigorously controlled environment. So it's almost like I need to put Guillermo's ideas on my own wallpaper and then move in. The engineering stuff, I did do a lot of work. It was a fascinating time. 1901, the world was changing. And it was the middle of the Industrial Revolution, and you think the beginning of the last century, the scale of what was about to happen, the number of things that, everything was, if you think within about 16 years, penicillin arrives, and you have the First World War, and then you're into the 30s the late 20s, and the Wall Street crash in America, and then the rise of Nazism.
Are you saying you brought all of early 20th century history into your
But
performance?
it's amazing it's amazing that Guillermo has chosen this time to set it. It's at the cusp of the world being a completely different place, and it is about a battle between the past and the future. And Edith Cushing, played by Mia Wasikowska, is the future. She's taken her own destiny into her own hands. She won't allow her future to be controlled by anybody. She's going to make her own future. And Thomas Sharp, my character, and his formidable sister, played by Jessica Chastain, they are the past. They are the old world, and they are weighed down by the secrets of the past, haunted by them, literally.
This is another character in a long litany that you've played that isn't necessarily, he's the hero, but he's not necessarily a good guy. Do you gravitate towards people like Guillermo does, who flourish in the shadows?
I think I just always love playing complicated people, because I think people are complicated. And there's part of the kind of, I enjoy the sort of amateur psychological investigation, if you like. I like trying to find the common humanity in characters which are dangerous or unsettling. And there's a turn for Thomas Sharp in the film, which I found very moving in the script. He's someone who presents himself with an external charisma, elegance, and a sophistication. And behind that is a lot of guilt and shame. And then beneath that is a vulnerability which Mia's character taps into, and out of the vulnerability he discovers a new kind of courage, which I just found it very moving. But I won't reveal what that is until you see it.
Are you one of those kind of actors that looks for parts of yourself in characters, or do you separate that as much as possible?
Well, it's important to distinguish that I haven't done any of the things that Thomas has done in his life. He's a mixed up cat. But I think it's important to approach characters with compassion. And the enemy of truthful acting is to sit in judgment on your character. You cannot put them in a tribunal and try them for their sins, for their crimes. You have to love them in spite of their flaws. And I love that about acting, is you try to find an explanation for their failings, and to play them honestly with compassion. So yeah.
Was that an approach that you learned in acting school?
Probably, yeah. If I traced it back. Yes, I think so. I think I was taught that if you judge less sympathetic characters, then there's a vanity at work there. There's a sort of that was the way my acting teacher said it. It's not your duty to judge them. Your duty is to understand them and to represent them, and that they exist in the story for a reason. All the great stories that we know and love wouldn't exist without bad guys, without complex characters or villains. That's the whole point of storytelling, I think.
So do you think of Loki as a real bad guy, or do you find something lovable in him too?
Loki is. There's the world domination aspect of it, I think, which is probably unsavory, let's say. Sort of the tyrannical fascist. To try and find the reasons for that, I was trying to find where is the emptiness in him that needs that status. And that was in the very first Thor film. Myself and Kenneth Branagh and Chris Hemsworth and Sir Anthony Hopkins talked about what that was. That there was a sort of he's someone who was left and abandoned to die as an infant, and has always felt like essentially he doesn't have a place in the universe, and or in the world he understands.
Feeling so much sympathy for him all of a sudden.
Well, that was the idea. I mean, I had to construct that, and then of course that hardens, his vulnerability hardens into a menace.
With a very distinctive hairstyle. Did you?
Very distinctive hairstyle,
insist?
very distinctive hat.
Yeah.
But the joy about him is that there's a mischief about him. That that he's come to understand himself, and he enjoys his badness. The devil plays the best tunes.
So you actually started acting even before you finished finished acting school. You have this impeccable education. You went to the Royal Academy in England and also graduated from Cambridge. But I read that you at some point kept.
What's interesting about that though, and I've never said this actually, but even listening to you say it, is it was really. It seems like a fait accompli that I went from one place to another, but actually there was a huge challenge presented to me by the administration at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. They didn't trust that I'd been to university, specifically to Cambridge, because they thought I was that's a place where all of the work happens up here, the sort of academic training, and that actually can be a hindrance to being an actor, because being an actor is about here. And it's about your instinct, and so it was. I actually had to do a lot of work in persuading them that I could feel as well as think. Yeah. So, but it was really interesting. One doesn't necessarily follow the other. They're very different kinds of course. The academic training at Cambridge is very rigorous, and I loved it. But being at RADA was about putting all that to one side. And I remember Irish guy said to me when I joined up, he said, look, you've been to Cambridge and that's all very impressive, and put your brain to one side, now it comes from your balls. So I took that as a
you put
good
that,
note.
that's like a sampler that you stitched onto a pillow now, right?
Yeah.
Keep that at home.
Yeah.
Well, but I did read that you, even though you had the success and you obviously excelled academically and in drama school, you also kept an audition diary, which was like a catalog of failures in your early days.
Wow, you really know, yeah. Yes, I did. Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I started auditioning, I wanted to make sure that I remembered everybody I was meeting. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget people and remembered their names. Very important in life to remember people's names, I feel. And I would write these things down as to make a note that I'd met people, casting directors, and it was starting to look a little bleak because there wasn't really, I wasn't booking any jobs. But it didn't. Luckily, I met a director called Joanna Hogg, a British director who had never made a film before, and she cast me in something, and I was completely free and didn't really know anything about acting for camera, and I owe her so much. It was a very small British film called Unrelated we made, and it was about a sort of previously dysfunctional family going on a holiday to Italy to try and find a way to be back together again. It never quite worked. And it was very true to life and very naturalistic, and we improvised a lot. And I learned more about the discipline of being true on camera than I ever had before.
Did you, at some point though, before that happened, think, I'm going to hang this up? Did you have a plan B of any kind?
Not really. I think plan Bs are dangerous because you'll always, people I think tend to lean on them. I had no plan B. I was always going to be an actor, and I guess that made me work harder in a way. Didn't have any other options.
Did you at least have terrible day jobs?
I was a waiter. Yeah. But it was actually a great sort of people watching experience being a waiter. It's a classic.
Were you a good waiter or a bad waiter?
I don't know. I never thought about it.
Well, yeah, you don't have tips, I guess, in England, so it doesn't.
Actually, we do, but we're just not as generous as you guys.
Glad you said it.
Yeah, but yeah, it was interesting. It was really interesting. I paid attention to people who were nice to me and people who weren't, and resolved to always be nice to waiters, essentially. But I actually enjoyed the camaraderie of it. You can do a lot of people watching, as a waiter. So it's good for a young actor to look at different kinds of people coming through the door.
Did your family, were they accepting of your decision to become an actor?
Yeah, they were. They were really supportive. They just understood it, I think. Very different. My mom and dad have very different tastes, very different understandings of the nature of the business. Because my mother had worked in opera, and so she understands sort of more. She was a stage manager and a producer, and understood the life of being a creative person. My father was a bit more unfamiliar, and he was just worried about me getting bored and lonely and impoverished. But he got it. He really got it. I was in something which is one of his favorite films. I was lucky enough to be in something that he loved, which is an HBO special about Winston Churchill in the 30s. And it's called The Gathering Storm. And Albert Finney plays Winston Churchill, and Vanessa Redgrave plays his wife, Clemmy. And it's about how actually Churchill was politically very unpopular in the early 30s, and people wanted him to sort of retire early and stop being such a warmonger, stop starting a fight, you know. And he was sort of in real trouble because he had the courage of his convictions, but nobody was listening. And I played his son Randolph. And my father was born in 1939, which is the year the film closes. So it meant a huge amount to him emotionally. You know, he lived the first 6 years of his life were the first 6 years of the Second World War. And when he saw that, he was like, off you go, son, you'll be all right. You know, he's from Glasgow, I hasten to add, in case you think I was speaking Welsh or something.
But then none of them probably thought that there would be such a thing as Hiddlestoners. That's what your fans are called,
Yeah.
right? There's some
They call
here,
them.
probably. Yeah.
Well, hey. Right, yeah. No, I mean, listen, it's funny, isn't it, the sort of the culture of fans and actors in the world today. I mean, I think of them as an audience. I just think of them as a part of the audience. You know, actors can't call themselves actors without an audience to watch their work, and my fans have been extraordinary in some regards. I'm a big supporter of UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, and last year I received a check in the post to deliver to UNICEF for £50,000, which my fans had raised in my name to give to them, which is an extraordinary thing. You think
It's amazing.
you realize that's an amazing impact that they have, and I felt very proud of that, in a way, proud of them. It was kind of stunning. Of course, you know, I'm sure there are always one or two that do some beyond normal things, but that's one or two.
Who would win in a fight, Hiddlestoners or Cumberbitches?
Yeah, apparently we have a vote from the front row. Listen, I don't think. I think Benedict, if he was standing here, we would want there to be no fighting involved, only passion, and very much try to inspire love as opposed to pugnaciousness.
Yeah, well played.
Yeah.
Before we get to audience questions, I want to give you a little bit of time. So this movie is a gothic romance, but you've also got a couple of other films coming out, and one of which we get to hear you sing. You play Hank Williams.
Yes, I do, yeah.
And we have a little clip of that from the movie.
Oh, wow.
Called I Saw the Light, and we'll play that.
Came in last night at 10:30. That baby of mine wouldn't let me in, so move it on over. Move it on over. Move it on over. Move over, little dog, 'cause the big dog's moving in. She changed the lock on our front door, and my door key don't fit no more, so get it on over. Move it on over. Scoot it on over. Move over, skinny dog, 'cause the fat dog's moving in.
Now why don't you come down here and you'll see what I'm talking about. at the left is much higher than the right. Now, you see it now? Now, good. Now, why don't you go back up and fix it?
Yes, ma'am.
And watch your head. There ain't no blood.
So you do all your own singing. Do you play instruments?
Yeah, I sing and I play. Yeah,
No, and
that was kind of part of the remit, I think.
was it terrifying to take on somebody as iconic as Hank Williams like that?
It was daunting initially, but that's part of the thrill of the challenge for me. The thing I wanted to invest myself in was I found the screenplay so moving, and music has a huge impact on my life. There's that phrase, the essayist Walter Pater said, "All art aspires to the condition of music." I think music is the most evocative, the most immediate, the most emotional art form. And the more I understood about Hank Williams, the more I realized that he is a cornerstone in the landscape of American music. Without Hank, music as we know it doesn't look the same. He inspired Bob Dylan and Keith Richards and Johnny Cash and Bruce Springsteen. You ask all of those guys, who's up there in the pantheon as their inspirations, and they talk about Hank. And Hank, in many ways, was the first rock star, and he was very poor, and he was born in 1923 in Alabama, and he was very weak. He was too weak to work on the railroad or work on the farm or join the draft, and the thing he found he was good at from a very young age was he could play the guitar. In exchange for chore money, he was taught the guitar by this man called Rufus Payne. They used to call him T-Tot, a black man who taught him the blues, and so really Hank Williams is someone who's channeling this extraordinary blues tradition and infusing it with his own style and creating country music, or not creating it, but taking it on a step from Ernest Tubb and Roy Acuff, who were the big stars at the time.
Do you feel like you have a responsibility as a performer when you're capturing, certainly when you're playing real life people, but even these moments in history which you're clearly really read up on, do you feel like you have a responsibility as a performer to tell a certain truth about that?
The responsibility is huge, simply because I felt a responsibility to his legacy, to his family, and to all the people to whom Hank means so much. I mean, I got to Nashville. I went to Nashville 6 weeks ahead of shooting, and I had this extraordinary time. I lived with a musician called Rodney Crowell, and he was my tutor in the ways of the blues. And just being in Nashville and understanding, people come up to you and say, "Oh, you're playing Hank." My granddaddy used to play these songs when I was just a wee kid on his knee, and you realize that Hank means so much to so many people, and so the responsibility is profound. But more than that, there was an amazing quote I found from an old friend of his called Danny Dill, who said, used to say, thing is, legends don't know they're legends when they're being made. They just people. They just folks. And that's the thing about Hank, is he was just a young man who sang and wrote from the bottom of his heart, and that's why he connected so deeply with the American South, is because when he sang about being in a doghouse, or he sang, "I'm so lonesome I could cry," everybody knew it was real. And in the wake of this, 1948, 1947, this is after the Second World War, self-respecting men of the South didn't say that. They didn't admit they were so lonesome I could cry. And that's what he touched something. And really, I just wanted to honor that. I wanted to honor his authenticity and his, he was a pure artist. I think he was a genius. I reserve the word very, I think John Lennon was a genius. I think there are very few musical geniuses out there, but I think he was. And I think there was something about him as a performer that I found interesting.
Did you perform yourself growing up? Did you have bands?
No. But there's something about, because I guess I'm a theatre actor at heart, in a way, and or that's where I began, and so I understand the connection, the purity of the connection between a performer and a live audience. There really is a magic that happens, you know. The play,
Right, guys? There's
Right,
magic
yeah.
that happens.
But when you're telling a story or singing a song or performing something that is very vulnerable, the audience are always complicit in that moment. And there's nothing like entertaining people or making people laugh or making people feel good. And I think he made people feel so good. You know, some of those early songs he wrote, Hey Good Lookin', and his cover of Lovesick Blues and Move It On Over, which you just saw. You know, if you listen to Hank's rendition of Move It On Over, you can actually sing Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley, which is coming down around the corner in 5 years' time. It's melodically exactly the same. And so his influence on early rock and roll is deep. And anyway, there was something in the, I should just say this, there was something in the script which is brilliant, which is something I've always thought about, which is the responsibility of the artist to represent a less comfortable side to human nature. And there's a scene in the film with a reporter from the Tribune where he's got a sort of cynicism about country music, and he thinks it's all packaged and synthetic. And Hank has had a few too many whiskeys already, and he fixes this reporter, and he says, "You don't understand. Music is sincere. Man sings a sad song. He knows a sad." And he talks about his responsibility as a singer to communicate the darker aspects of human nature, you know, anger, misery, sorrow, shame. And it's funny because I'd been on set, going back to Loki, a long time ago now with Anthony Hopkins, and he told me this story about his own fascination with sort of screen villains. And he said, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and I've played lots of different characters. I've played kings and butlers and poets and warriors and soldiers and princes, and people stop me in the street and they ask me about one man. And you all know who that man is. And he said, it's fascinating. You know, all of us, we'd like our lives to be full of love and friendship and laughter and all these lovely things. We like to, you know, but we like to go into a dark room on a Friday night with all the lights out. We all like to sit there together and want to watch someone lean into the darkness. We lean there. But he was making an interesting point, which is that we do. You know, if you think of the great artists we admire, the great writers, the great musicians, the great actors, whether it's, Goya or Amy Winehouse or Heath Ledger, we're so compelled by performers who dare to lean into something more unsettling. I understood that that's who, Hank was one of those guys. He was one of those performers who was able to, in a way, perform open heart surgery on himself and put it into song and give it to the world. And, you know, it was one of the most incredibly fulfilling experiences of my life as an actor, and I hope people enjoy the film when they see it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the difference between actors and everybody else. Actors want to live in that emotional moment, and all the rest of us are like, we'll talk about that with our shrink, maybe.
I don't know, I don't know if we don't want to live in it forever, but there's something about exploring that, for sure.
Do you guys want to ask some questions? Okay. Do we have the mics? Okay. We're going to bring the mics down. Okay. So actually what we're going to do is we have some mics set up, and if you guys could pull out and stand by the mics, that way everybody can hear you and people watching at home can hear you too. Thank you. All right, you're first up, over here on the left.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
My name is Isabel.
Hi, Isabel.
I just want to say thank you for inspiring the Hiddlestoners because not only with your roles, but with the way you live your life.
Thank you.
You said some quotes that show us the light inside of us. So I just want to say thank you. And like, this opportunity is the biggest in my life. I saw Crimson Peak last week. I know the secrets.
Okay.
Don't tell
anybody.
No, I won't
spoilers.
say
No
anything.
spoilers.
So I was just wondering if I could give you a hug.
Oh. You know, maybe.
I'm married, don't worry.
Yeah, oh, sure. Come on then. Okay, yeah. Normally you have to take me out to dinner first, but it's fine. There you go. Thank you so much.
I gave you a photo frame from Honduras. I don't know if you got it.
I don't know if I got it yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, keep going over here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Eric.
Hello, sir.
I'd like to extrapolate on what you said in your conversation with Anthony Hopkins. He said that he's played all these roles, but people remember that one character. We definitely know you as more than just Loki, but in this culture right now, we kind of, and I speak as a huge fan of the Marvel movies, these roles are kind of very larger than life. I was wondering how you as an actor, how do you not kind of let yourself be overshadowed by the size of Loki and his imprint in pop culture?
I'm very. I mean, I should just say it's still a source of constant surprise that the impact that character has had, and I approached it like I approach every other character I play. Tried to give him dimension and a degree of psychological truth in spite of the larger-than-life aspect of it. And never in my wildest dreams would I have predicted that it would catch fire like he has. But I suppose I chase my own curiosity in a way. It may be a process I'm not entirely conscious of, that I'll be able to look back on and understand why I wanted to do certain things. And also, I became an actor to play lots of different people. I'm so, I became an actor because I'm such a fan of the cinema itself. I believe in the power of storytelling. And I believe in it very sincerely because it changed my life. And I think it really has the power to impact people. And you know, many of us are a little bit older probably, and so. But I think there's a moment, specifically in the second decade of life, when one's a teenager in one's early 20s, cinema and theatre can really speak to you and change the way you conceive of the world. And then it happened. And the great surprise is when it keeps happening, and you think it's not going to happen again. You see a film that makes you stay in your seat for 5 minutes after the credits, just thinking about what you've just seen, and it stays with you for a day, for an afternoon, for a week, for a month, for a year. It still happens to me, and I just want to be part of that conversation. I really believe in it, and so I just commit myself to the truth of the character in the world of the film every time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes.
I just have one question. What advice would you give to young directors starting out in regard of working with actors? Like, which tips would you give, advice, in order to like communicate better with the actors and create a more organic process?
I'm always so cautious about giving advice because I think people need to find their own way, but or they want to, you know. But if I had anything to say, I would say be open. Be open and be receptive. Don't be closed. You know, that I always sort of say that the most exciting acting I've ever done is when I feel like I'm being given the secrets of the scene by the other actor, and it feels like a tennis match. Is that you don't know how they're pulling out the shots they're pulling out, but you know you have to just get it back across the net. And that's about the discipline of preparation before you start work, and then freedom in the work, so that you know your lines, know the world of the film, know who you're playing, and then turn up and play, be there, just be there. Make time to play. That's what I'd say. Sorry, I'll try and be a bit more brief so you can all get through it.
Oh, hello, I lost my voice, sorry. But I too had the pleasure of seeing the film last week, and I saw elements of Jack Clayton's The Innocents, Hitchcock's Rebecca, The Changeling. I'm a big fan of Gothic horror as well. So I was wondering if there were any specific films that you referenced, and if so, did you study the blocking of those films so that you'd be able to interact with the set better in the cinematography? Or if there was just the performances of the actors and actresses inside the films?
Well, all those films you mentioned, I know Guillermo would tip his hat to that and congratulate you on recognizing it too. I wanted to stay away from cinematic inspiration, because I didn't want anything to seem like an impersonation of somebody else. So I really dug into the literature. The literature for me was very inspiring. I love Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. It's a fantastic novel. I remember I read it for the first time when I was about 17, and it made a huge impact. It's beautifully written, and then I read it again in my mid-20s, so I could see the echoes of that structure in the script. But no, I think I just wanted to stay away from imitation. So my inspirations were much more painting-oriented and literature-orientated. The paintings of Caspar David Friedrich were really inspiring to me. He has a way of representing the sort of the passion of romance in some of his paintings, which I found very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask about the preparation that you do as an actor between a film, preparing for a film, as opposed to preparing for theater, because you talk about being trained for theater as a theater actor, and you came into film never doing that before. I imagine for you also the rewards are different. You have a different platform. A theater is more intimate and it's live, where a film will live on forever. The digital, the celluloid is never going away. So about the preparation and the reward that you find in each.
I think I love them both. I really do. And immediately, there are so many, I could go on for hours, but the thing that immediately comes up is the difference in the working methods itself. Theatre, the pleasure of working in the theatre is being able to refine the integrity of the whole piece over a period of months, so that you perform the entire narrative from A to Z every night, night after night after night, and what happens is your authority over the work gets stronger and stronger, and so your power to change things and try things out changes. Whereas in film, you're working in an isolated moment, and so you turn up on set and you work on that one scene with a kind of forensic attention for one day, and then you leave it and it's gone. And so you never have the same sense of the whole piece, and you yield that to the editor and to the director. But at the same time, you have the time in film to be as forensic as that. Whereas on stage, it's live and you have to keep going. And so if you make a mistake, or if you try something out and it doesn't work, there's no time to go back and do it again.
Would you encourage film actors to try theater?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. It sharpens your instinct, I think. It keeps you on your toes. But interestingly enough, I would encourage theatre actors to do film as well, because there's something so unforgiving about the camera and the truthfulness of it. I worked with a director called Terence Davis once in a film called The Deep Blue Sea, and he said, the camera captures the truth, but it also captures falsity. So if you don't feel that it's true, don't do it. And that's always the interesting myth about acting, is that it's a whole bunch of art, it's all artifice. Whereas I think any of us would admit, when we've been moved, and if I went round and asked, when were you last profoundly moved by an actor? The likelihood is that they're being truthful in that moment as opposed to dishonest. That there's more truth than artifice. And I think that's the rigor, in a way, of being an actor.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for maybe one more question.
Or 3 more, but I'll be brief. How about that? Okay.
Hello, my name is Nidhi, and I'm also an avid Marvel fan. I also loved Only Lovers Left Alive, and I believe Fitzgerald in Midnight in Paris. And I was just wondering if there was, well, it's an either-or question. Either is there a role that hasn't been made yet that you would find to be your dream role, like a role that hasn't been written? Or is there a role that has been written that you would love to play but haven't yet?
Ooh. I don't know. I don't like to make too many plans because it's more exciting to see what comes up, you know. And sometimes you'll be presented with something that turns into something very exciting, you know, like all of those characters you mentioned, actually. It's funny because directors are very generous, and they can offer you a silhouette that you then step into, and they're open enough to allow you to inform who they are. So obviously Loki had a very distinct, you know, shape. He'd been a Norse god and a comic book villain for a long time, but I was able to sort of try and infuse him with what I understood as human motivations. Jim Jarmusch, with Only Lovers Left Alive, he knew that this guy was moody, and and that he was a musician, and that he had a passion for science, and that those twin passions for music and science were wedded to the same thing. That it was actually about the vibration of molecules, and you know. And also that he was deeply romantic, actually, that underneath all of his sort of depressiveness, there was a huge heart. And we had a wonderful time, you know, Jim and I and Tilda Swinton, talking about the sort of things they'd talk about, you know. I remember one day, Tilda came down, we were doing a week of prep, and by prep I mean sitting around a table for 8 hours and talking about what we loved. And Tilda came in with a printout from a BBC website, which she knew Jim would love, and they discovered a star in the universe that was made out of a cluster of shattered diamonds and emitted a musical signal. And Jim was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool. We should put that in the movie." You know, so we did. You know? So yeah, there's always room for maneuver.
Do you do impressions of all your directors?
I don't know. The impression thing is something I've always that's how I tell stories, I guess. So yeah, I do some impressions. Thanks. 2 more. 1, 2.
You've talked a lot about artists, you know, exposing their darker sides, like Hank Williams touching on his struggles, Van Gogh, all these great people who have, you know, anxiety or depression or whatever it is. I was just wondering, for someone, obviously you've been tremendously successful, do you have your own anxiety, nervousness, demons that you face, and how do you cope with that, perhaps, when you're, you know, preparing for a role?
Of course I do. Yeah. I wouldn't be human if I didn't.
Right.
I don't know how I channel it. You know, it's I sort of enjoy the fact that life gets a bit more complicated. And I also think that's the point of life, is that just when you think you've got the hang of it, life will surprise you, you know? And I think that can be said for anyone in any walk of life. And I try to turn, if I have any anxiety, I try to turn it into excitement. Certainly about performing. But yeah, I wouldn't be human if I hadn't felt, you know, lonely and sad and angry and all the things that we all feel, you know.
And willing to come be on stage at the drop of a hat.
that was all good. I try to, you know, I sort of, a weird self-medication is I run a lot.
I think on that note, I'm going to cut you off because you have to go.
Okay.
You have to run.
Have to run.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great.